What is going on, you guys? This is Anna. Welcome back to the channel. So today we're actually doing something different. We're going to do a tier list of who I believe are the most overrated and underrated UFC fighters. Now they have a different types of fighters, as you can see here, old and new. You know what I mean? They have fighters that are currently fighting today, and then they also have some of the all-time greats, really, and some that are not really all that great. But yeah, let's go ahead and get right into it. So they start off with Ben Askren here. Now, Ben Askren, and when it comes to the UFC sense, you're going to have to put him probably in super overrated. But overall, his career, I mean, he's only had, 2 losses. And he lost to, obviously, Jorge Masvidal, which was the 5-second knockout. And then he had the Damian Maia fight. I liked Ben Askren for the most part. I thought he was a pretty interesting character. Here, I'm going to go... I'm going to just say overrated. The reason being, when you got to the big leagues, I mean, you had a fight with Robbie Lawler, and it was not a good stoppage whatsoever. That was a really bad stoppage against Robbie Lawler. And then you had the fight with being predictable as shit, and then getting your ass knocked out in 5 seconds with a knee against Jorge Masvidal. Which, by the way, if that didn't happen, I think Ben Askren wins that fight. And then obviously the fight with him and Damian Maia, he had a pretty good performance, but then he got choked out though. He got caught and choked. So yeah, I'm gonna have to put him in overrated, because when he got to the UFC, even though I understand he was a lot older, he really wasn't in his prime, but I still gotta go overrated. BJ Penn, obviously the latter half of his career has been absolutely horrible. Man, this is tough, but he's definitely one of the all-time great lightweights. And I don't really want to, obviously the last few fights that he's had were not great at all. I don't know why properly overrated. I'm gonna change this to properly rated, just because it doesn't really make any sense. I say properly rated, not properly overrated. What the hell? But anyway, so yeah, properly rated. There you go. I think I want to put him in there. I think he's properly rated because he's definitely one of the all-time greatest lightweights. You know what I mean? He was dominant from in the beginning of his career, obviously. When he got older, obviously, he started losing a lot. But in the UFC, he fought some of the best, and he did very well. So I got to put him properly rated because he was a UFC champion. Okay, I understand that I think his record, is 16-14 overall, which is not great, but the beginning of his career was fantastic. Obviously, the latter half, not so much. Brock Lesnar. Now, this is tough, because obviously Brock Lesnar, I want to put him in overrated. He was a UFC heavyweight champion, so I got to give him some credit on that. His record's not really all that great. He beat Mark Hunt, and he was on steroids. This is a tough one for me. I'm going to probably put Brock Lesnar. I'm not going to put him in properly rated or overrated. I'm going to put him in properly rated. He could go to overrated for me. His record really wasn't all that great, but his fight against Alistair Overeem, he was having that issue. I forgot what it was called. So that definitely hampered him a little bit. And I mean, listen, he transitioned from one sport to another pretty quickly. I mean, he went from, obviously, to the WWE. Then he went to do football, but that didn't work out. And then he went to the UFC, and he became a UFC champion. So I gotta have to put him properly rated. And when you put it like that, honestly, when I put it like that, I think he is properly rated. Yeah. Yeah, let's go ahead and get into the next one. It's Conor McGregor. He's my favorite fighter. I think Conor McGregor's properly rated as well. I think he's properly rated. I mean, I don't think he's underrated or neither overrated. Obviously, the latter half of his career hasn't been great. I mean, he's lost to Dustin Poirier twice now. I mean, even though the last fight was a little fluky, but I mean, he did have some issues though. I remember when he tried to go for a takedown because he got hit with some shots by Dustin Poirier, and then obviously the fight before he got knocked out. His fight against Khabib wasn't great, but overall, I mean, I gotta put him properly rated. I think he's a properly rated fighter. I think people will give him the respect, but some people just hate on him so much because it's Conor McGregor that they really underrate him, honestly, because he was truly great from 14, 15 to 2016, I mean, man, he was on another level. I mean, he's the reason why I love the sport today. So I have to put him in that tier of properly rated. Chris Cyborg, a tough one. I'm gonna say, man, that's a close one. Cause she's great. Don't get me wrong, she is really good. But man, when that fight against Amanda Nunes was not, man, that's terrible. I don't really know what she's doing. I mean, I know that I think she's a champion in a different company. But man, I'm gonna have to say, I'm gonna go. Damn, I don't really want to feel properly rated. I'll go overrated. Listen, I wish that she would have stayed in the UFC, but for now I'm going to put her in overrated just because, obviously, what happened between her and Nunes, she fumbled badly. Terribly. What a terrible game plan from Cyborg. Terrible game plan. And I'm just going to kind of base it just off her UFC career. Obviously, she was dominant for quite a while. But when she faced somebody like Nunes, I mean, look what happened to her. She got completely annihilated. I mean, bro, that fight lasted a minute and she got her ass knocked out. It was terrible. So I'm going to go overrated. Next, Daniel Cormier, one of my favorite fighters. I think he's underrated. He's a great fighter, man. I don't know what else to say. He's top 5 all time for me. I think he's probably 5 or something like that, or maybe 4. In my honest opinion, I hold Daniel Cormier. He's a double champion in the light heavyweight and heavyweight division. Knocked out the heavyweight GOAT. Obviously, he lost the trilogy, but still, I think he's one of the all-time greats. You have to definitely, if he's not top 5, he's top 10 for sure. And yeah, man, I mean, his striking was fantastic. His grappling is otherworldly. I mean, he was just good all around. He's a great fighter. I'm gonna put him in underrated. Derek Lewis. I love Derek Lewis. I'm a Derek Lewis guy. I might have to put him overrated. I know. Derek Lewis, when the lights were bright, he just didn't get the job done, man. You know what I mean? He didn't get the job done. It's just man. And he's a knockout artist. He's one of the heaviest hitters in the heavyweight division that we've ever seen. But, man, I mean, when he fought Gane, I mean, that was a terrible performance. What happened to him against Tai Tuivasa, and then obviously the Pavlovich fight, even though that was a bad stoppage. And then obviously his fight with Daniel Cormier was not good. That was a bad performance from him. I mean, yeah, I mean, you have to put him in overrated, I think. Because even though he had great fights and he had some knockout moments, when it got to the top of the division, aside Curtis Blades and I mean, he beat Francis, but that was a horrible fight. I mean, who really was scoring the fight? I think everybody fell asleep during that fight. So I'm going to have to put him in the overrated tier. It pains me to say it, but I got to put him in the overrated tier. Cerrone, it's either probably rated or overrated. Cerrone is great. He really is, but, I mean, he never really amounted to the upper level of being a champion. Man, do I put him in overrated too? These are two guys that are some of the most likable. People love these two guys. I'm going to be controversial. I'm going to put him overrated. I know. But, bro, when it came to the top of the division, he just wasn't good enough. You know what I mean? You have to take that into perspective as well. You know what I mean? He had some great finishes. One of the best strikers that we've ever seen, but he's just not on that level. I have to say. So I'm going to have to put him as overrated. Yeah, I mean, sheesh. Now that I think about it, man, Ben Askren looks like he might be super overrated, but for now we're going to keep him overrated. Eddie Alvarez, interesting. I mean, he was the UFC champ. He beat RDA for the title. He lost to Conor McGregor. Then he beat Justin Gaethje, and then I think he lost to Dustin Poirier, and that was pretty much it for Eddie Alvarez in the UFC. Outside the UFC, I mean, I know he's had some up and downs outside the UFC. After the UFC, obviously post UFC. mean, man, I'll put him properly rated. There's nothing really wrong with Eddie Alvarez. I mean, he was a UFC champion. Shout out to him. And he had a really good fight too with Justin Gaethje, and that was a great fight, pretty good performance. So yeah, I'm gonna put him in the properly rated category. I'm sorry, I don't know who this person is, so I'm gonna move him all the way over here. I'm not gonna rank him because I don't know who that is. BJ Penn, I'm gonna put BJ Penn as underrated. Obviously, I think nowadays people look at not BJ Penn. What the fuck am I talking about? That's Frankie Edgar. Sorry. Sorry. That's Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar. I'm going to put him in underrated. I think he's underrated strictly because Frankie Edgar, obviously the latter half of his career, is kind of similar to BJ Penn. But man, Frankie Edgar was great, man. He was another UFC champion. Another all-time great to me. Yeah, he's just a great fighter. And I think just the latter half of his career, people think that he's a bum. Obviously, the casuals probably believe that, but the real fans know that he is a great fighter. He was a great fighter, and I'm going to put him in the underrated tier because I think people look at what has happened recently, and they're like, oh, dude, he's dog shit. He's terrible, bro. Like, you saw him, he got knocked out in his final fight, and he got knocked out by Corey Sandhagen and Marlon Vera. Like, yeah, he did, but, I mean, he's old as balls right now. Like, bro, Frankie Edgar is really old. You know what I mean? And still, you got to give him some credit in that department that, he was still hanging with those guys, even though, I know his last few fights were not great, but I'm going to put him in the underrated. I'm going to put him in the underrated category right here. George St. Pierre. I mean, I don't think he's overrated or underrated. I don't, but I'm going to put him underrated because, man, do I put him, yeah. I mean, a lot of people consider him the GOAT. I don't, but he's definitely up there. He's I think he's number 2 for me. I think I have George St. Pierre as the number 2 greatest fighter in the history of the sport. He avenged every loss that he's had. He came back after a 4-year layoff and submitted Michael Bisping. I mean, that's insane. Yeah, and I mean, he was almost going to fight again and face Khabib. And if he would have beat Khabib, oh my goodness, bro. If he would have beat Khabib coming back, that would have been insane. But I'm going to put George St. Pierre underrated. I still feel like people don't really truly understand how great he was. Obviously, the real MMA fans put him on the top tier levels. But I don't think too many people know enough about George St. Pierre. I mean, you got to do your homework. Do your homework about George St. Pierre. Who's that, Greg Hardy? I think that's Greg Hardy. He's super overrated. He fucking sucks. He's a terrible fucking fighter. Greg Hardy is terrible. I'm sorry. But in the UFC overall, he fucking sucks. He sucks. He's a terrible fighter. I mean, I don't even know how the fuck he got in the UFC, to be honest with you. I mean, it's because he had a name, because he wasn't in the NFL. Who gives a fuck? He's terrible. Super overrated. Henry Cejudo. I'm thinking of putting Henry Cejudo underrated because he's definitely up there as one of the all-time greats, and that people don't give him the respect that he deserves. I think I'm going to put him underrated too, man. Another double champ. He's a great fighter. Yeah, I'm going to have to put him in underrated. I'm going to put him underrated. And if he's able to beat Aljamain Sterling, man, that's insane. That's crazy. That's insane. Israel Adesanya. One of my favorite fighters, even though yesterday he did say some controversial stuff. I mean, by the time this comes out, he probably said it a few days ago. He said stuff about Dricus du Plessis that I don't really necessarily agree with. I mean, he said some I guess you can say racist stuff about Dricus du Plessis. So, but as a fighter, I mean, some people think he's overrated. Some people think I'm going to put him in properly rated. I think people understand how good he is. But some people really think that he's overrated. I think that he's a great fighter. What can we say about Izzy? Izzy's a great fighter. So I'm going to put him in the properly rated category. So yeah. I don't know who this is. So I'm going to move him down here. John Jones. I mean, he's properly rated. I think everybody knows how great he is. Everybody, pretty much, almost everybody considers him to be the greatest fighter of all time. You know, including myself. So there's really no issue with John Jones here. To be honest with you, I think he's probably rated. Yeah, I'm gonna put Jones there. Jose Aldo, I'm gonna put Jose Aldo underrated. I didn't even want to put him super underrated, but I'm gonna put him underrated. Yeah, he's a very good fighter, one of the greatest featherweights ever. Probably number 2 or number 3 for me. Move this camera over here. Yeah, I think he's a good fighter, man. I mean, what else can you really say about him? He's a hell of a fighter. What else can I say? Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje, this is an interesting one. I mean, he kind of falls in line, like, with the other guys. He was an interim champion, but he kind of falls in line similar to Cowboy, where he can't really beat the top guys. Like I think if he fights Dustin, I think Dustin wins. If he, obviously, what happened to him and Oliveira, what happened between him and Khabib. For now, I'm gonna put him in properly rated. If he loses to Dustin Poirier, he goes to overrated. For now, I'm gonna put him in properly rated. But that can change. This can change. Kamaru Usman, I mean, I'm thinking of putting him underrated. It's between probably rated and underrated, to be honest with you, because he is a great fighter. And people are going to take a lot of things away from him. I'm going to put him properly rated. Yeah, he's a really good fighter. He's he's the greatest, not the second greatest, sorry. He's not the greatest welterweight ever. He's the second greatest welterweight of all time. He's a fantastic fighter, man. I mean, and the knockout power that he showed in his UFC run, knocking out Gilbert Burns and knocking out Jorge Masvidal, knocking out Kobe Covington, and almost lapping everybody aside Leon Edwards. I mean, that's insane. It's crazy. I mean, he's definitely a great fighter, one of the all-time greats for sure, so I'm going to put him in the properly rated. Kimbo Slice. Rest in peace to Kimbo Slice. He wasn't really all that great in the UFC. Let's just be honest. He's overrated. Yeah, he's just not. I mean, in the UFC, it just didn't really translate at all. He wasn't really all that good, to be honest with you, so I'm going to have to put him in the overrated category. I mean, yeah, he's not considered, I don't think anybody considers him an all-time great at all. But yeah, I mean, he didn't do nothing really in the UFC. You know what I mean? He was just really known for his street fights and stuff like that he kind of hosted and stuff. And he also fought as well in those. But overall, in the UFC, I mean, it didn't really translate. So I'm going to put him in the overrated. Is this Lyoto Machida? I believe it's Lyoto Machida. I think that is. Oh, that's not Vitor, right? Oh, my goodness, I'm so sorry. Michael Johnson. Oh man, dude, he could be the greatest fighter ever and then the worst fighter sometimes. I mean, bro, he's actually like pretty good, to be honest with you. So I might put him underrated. He's like actually not that bad. He knocked out Dustin Poirier. You know what I mean? But there's sometimes where he sucks. You know what I mean? But there's sometimes he's like insanely good. Like he's still to this day, he's still catching dubs to this day. So I actually got to give Michael Johnson some credit, bro. He's pretty good. So I'm gonna put him here. I'm gonna put Michael Johnson in the underrated category. Just because I think his record, you're gonna look at his record and be like, oh my god, this dude fucking sucks. But overall, like, he has some impressive wins, and I believe he was top 5 lightweight at some point. I understand that he's in like probably these type of guys where they can really be the champion, but his record is gonna show how bad his record is. Doesn't really show how good of a fighter he is, though. He's actually a pretty good fighter. So I'm gonna put him in the underrated. I forgot her name. I'll get back to her. Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz is overrated. I like Nate Diaz. I'm a Nate Diaz guy. But he's overrated. I mean, the reason why he got this fandom is because of Conor McGregor. I mean, he will definitely have a fan base even without Conor, but like, to the level where he is now, like, do you think that he will be getting a fight with Jake Paul if it wasn't for Conor? No, I mean, I don't think he would, to be honest with you. Nate Diaz, he's a good fighter, but he's just one of those guys who isn't good enough to beat the top of the division. Obviously, I know he beat Conor McGregor. Oh my God, dude, he beat Conor McGregor. I mean, bro, Conor McGregor, he's a lot bigger than Conor. He's a weight class higher than Conor. I mean, and Conor McGregor took him lightly in that first fight. So, but Nate Diaz is a good fighter, but he's just overrated. He's definitely overrated for sure. Nick Diaz, his brother, on the other hand, I mean, I'm gonna go put him properly rated. Yeah, I'm gonna put him properly rated. I think he's a great fighter. Obviously, he couldn't beat the top guys in the UFC, but he's definitely very good, though. I mean, in Strike, I believe he was in Strikeforce, and he was the welterweight champion in Strikeforce. So he had the makings of a champion. And by the way, he took a long layoff, and we didn't really get to see like Nick Diaz for real. And people forget how great he was. He's like a very good fighter. And I think he's better than Nate, to be honest with you. He's a better fighter than Nate Diaz, to be honest. So, yeah. Ronda Rousey. Oh, man. Oh, man. She's either super overrated or overrated. Because, my goodness. I'm going to put her super overrated. Listen. Ronda Rousey, she got all this fame. She was definitely one of the most dominant women in all of the UFC. But, man, the way that she got dominated by Holly Holm and then Amanda Nunes after, my goodness, it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth about her. Like, it's not great. She's obviously a pretty good fighter, but overall, I'm going to say this. She's definitely, I'm going to have to put her super overrated, I think. Yeah. It's just that, because she wasn't beating, like, insane, great comp when she was fighting, you know what I mean? Like, yes, she was winning, but when she fought somebody who had some competence, two fighters, Amanda Nunes and then also Holly Holm, look what happened to her. She got her ass knocked out. So, I'm going to have to put her in the super overrated. Let me check this camera real quick. Let me see real quick. All right. We got plenty of time. All right, let's go to, who's this right here? That looks like Kai Car France. Who the fuck is that? I think that's Kai Car France, but I'm not even entirely sure, to be honest, who that is. Tyron Woodley, to be honest, I'm going to put underrated. Because the reason why I'm going to put underrated, there's nobody in the super underrated, by the way. There ain't nobody got really in the super underrated. Tyron Woodley, the reason why I put him in underrated, to be honest, the reason why, the fight with Jake Paul. The fight, everybody is going to make fun of Tyron Woodley and call him a bum when he actually never really was. I mean, he's not a bum. I mean, you look at his time in the UFC, he's probably the third greatest welterweight of all time. What he's done in the UFC. I mean, he could beat guys like Robbie Lawler. He beat Darren Till. He beat Wonder Boy. He's beaten a lot of the top guys in the division. Damian Maia, even though that fight was boring as shit. So yeah, you got to give him the respect. And I'm going to give him that respect. I'm going to put him in the underrated because I think nowadays people are going to think of Tyron Woodley and it's going to think of the knockout that he suffered against Jake Paul. So I got to put him in underrated. This is Wanderlei Silva. I mean, he was good outside the UFC, but in the UFC, he really didn't do much. I can't really say too much about him because I don't know too much about him. I'm going to put him properly rated. He's fine. I don't really know too much about him. I think this is Lyoto Machida, isn't it? I don't know too much about Lyoto Machida anyway, and I think this is... I forgot her name. But yeah, anyway. I'm going to stop it right here. So this is my overrated and underrated people. It's not everybody, by the way. But these are some of the fighters that... obviously that I know, and I rated them and see if they're underrated or overrated. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys soon with another one. Peace.